Hello YouTube, this is Thomas Judge back once again with another YouTube reading guide series. Today is the seventh video of a 10 video series walking through the often overlooked and underrated annual events published by DC throughout the 90s. To create this guide, I've read all of the annuals published by DC throughout the 90s, and that's about 200 issues give or take, and I've used that to build this reading guide. Hopefully this is useful to you as an overview if you're getting into DC and if you're trying to understand exactly what these annual events are and where they fit in. With no further ado, in 1997, we have the DC annual event Pulp Heroes. Now, this was one of the annual crossovers, and the theme for this one was featuring DC superheroes in pulp fiction style stories with kind of hard boiled crime noir, that sort of thing. So, if you're not familiar with the idea of pulp fiction or just pulp literature, we're looking at things like blaxploitation movies. Uh, if you've seen the Pulp Fiction movie by Tarantino or things like Jackie Brown by Tarantino, it's that kind of feel. A lot of Tarzan, Conan, a lot of Dan Dare comics came out in this era. It's that kind of style. It's almost a bit like Archer, if you know the the cartoon Archer. So, in terms of pulp heroes and the feel of this, what we have is several dozen issues, but they're split into particular themes. Now, all these issues are self-contained, so they're all one and dones, and a lot of time people just give you a list of what the issues are. However, they are branded in particular thematic ways. So I'm going to list those here because there's actually 5 different types. We're going to start off with Tales of the Unexpected. Here we have Action Comics Annual 9. You can see it's branded Tales of the Unexpected. Now, this was written by David Michelini. Honestly, this pretty much had a totally normal Superman issue tone. I didn't see at all what was pulp hero-y about this at all. So it's worth noting that this features Superman in his electric power phase, which is basically happening at this point in 1997 in the mainstream comics. If you want to know more about that, my Superman reading order is coming soon, so you can see what's going on there. Next up, we have Catwoman Annual number 4. This is a standard story of Selena in Egypt. It's got a kind of a supernatural central idea, which kind of fits in with the Tales of the Unexpected branding because a lot of those did have kind of paranormal aspects to it. Think of stuff like Tales from the Crypt and things like that. It's all a similar sort of thing. This issue does not have Batman in it, by the way. Teen Titans Annual number 1 also had Tales of the Unexpected branding. This was written by Dan Jurgens, and it refers to events in issues 9 to 11 of the ongoing Teen Titans series at the time. Not essential to read that, but it definitely adds more context. This has kind of like a horror theme to it, which kind of fits in with the Tales of the Unexpected branding. And finally, for this little sub-label, we have Wonder Woman Annual number 6. So this is 2 stories. The first one is by John Byrne, and the second one is starring Artemis, and is actually kind of a key story for her character arc because it's set straight after the Artemis Requiem miniseries. Now, I haven't read much Wonder Woman, I haven't read much Artemis. I do plan on doing so because I figure after reading all 2000 or so Superman issues that I'm reading now, the next big key and really popular DC character to read has to be Wonder Woman, right? So that's what I'll be reading next. And it'll be interesting to seeing where this fits in. Let's move on to our second branded theme for this event, which is the suspense detective branding. What we have here is Aquaman Annual number 3. You can see the suspense detective branding there. It contains 3 detective stories written by Peter David, Abnett and Lanning, and William Messner Loebs, respectively. Azrael Annual 3. This is written by Dennis O'Neill, and it's such a hard-boiled gumshoe story that's actually kind of hard to read. Like imagine Elmore Leonard squared. Like it was just crazy. Really impressive actually to read it, but just crazy. Next is Batman Annual 21, written by Doug Mensch. It's a classic style story of Batman in Tibet. JLA Annual number 1, 2 stories here. Both of them are pretty standard detective or detection fare. The first one is about the Martian Manhunter, who obviously is a Manhunter, and the second is about the whole JLA doing like a detection thing. And finally, for the suspense detective branding, we have Superman Man of Steel Annual number 6, written by Louise Simonson, writing a Superman story, and it stars Electric Superman again. Okay, the third branded bit for this particular DC event are the ones branded My Greatest Adventure. So let's start off with Batman Legends of the Dark Knight Annual 7. This was written by James Robinson and is a standard story about a mystery at an airshow. Next up is Detective Comics Annual number 10. This was written by Chuck Dixon and is a standard Batman story about rescuing hostages in South America. Then we have Green Lantern Annual number 6. This was written by Ron Mars and is based on the Edgar Rice Burroughs kind of Tarzan, John Carter ideas, starring Kyle in this odd kind of meta Wizard of Oz story. So at this point, Kyle is Green Lantern. Next, we have Superboy Annual number 4. This references the Superman arc Blackout, which is an arc that happened in Superman in the early 90s, actually. Um, yeah, God, I must have covered it right at the beginning of my Superman reading order. So I'll be, like I said, I'll be dropping that video series relatively soon. And finally, we have Superman Annual number 9, written by Dan Jurgens. This also stars Electric Power Superman. I'll be honest, it's a tedious story about a magical medallion from Bhutan being discovered by Jimmy Olsen. Um, this is the only story, however, of all of this annual event, the whole thing, that is actually relevant for a later Superman story in continuity. And it's actually relevant for the Millennium Giants arc. Again, that'll come up in my Superman reading order. Moving on, we have another themed branding here for the Pulp Heroes event, which is young romance. So let's start off with Batman Shadow of the Bat Annual number 5. So this is quite noir as in like sort of detective noir, pulp noir. This stars a guy called Joe Potato as a private investigator hired by Poison Ivy. Apparently, he's met Batman before, and he does so again in this story. Um, I guess the private detective, private investigator shtick is kind of a classic film noir sort of thing, of all the officers in all the world, this dame had to walk into mine. One of those sorts of things. So it kind of is in keeping with the feel here, and it works well. Next up, we have Flash, Annual number 10. Weirdly, this is a lot like the Elseworld issue we saw back in video 4, which was 1994, in just that it's kind of about the filming of a Flash biopic and love story, and that's kind of half the issue. And then the second half is this unrelated story about the Pied Piper, who's like a little known former rogue who is gay and was once half of the criminal duo Sound and Fury. This annual is just really weird. Yeah, it was just odd. Next up, we have Nightwing Annual 1, written by Devin Grayson. Yep, that is her real name, and she's writing Nightwing. The irony, I know. And it's a decent standalone Nightwing story. The editorial notes in the back set this issue as taking place just before the Chuck Dixon era, even though it was published around a year after the Chuck Dixon run started. I haven't read Nightwing. I do really want to read it. It's a pretty brief run, only 150 or so issues, so I really should do that at some point. Starman Annual 2. This was written by James Robinson. Don't have much to say about this one. Supergirl Annual number 2. Two shorter stories are contained within this, and the second one was written by Chuck Dixon. Okay, that's the other young romance. The very last themed part of the branding was weird Western tales. So with this, we'll start off with Hitman, Annual number 1. This was written by Garth Ennis, who's the quintessential Hitman writer. And this Western themed Hitman story fits in perfectly with the rest of the Hitman series, to be honest. So it really doesn't feel any more pulp noir or kind of that sort of feel than any of the rest of Hitman. So if you read Hitman, you should definitely read this. It's totally in keeping with that. Impulse Annual 2. So this is another Western setting, understandably. It's a weird Western tale. And this issue has two stories in it. The first is about an Elseworlds Impulse, and the second is about an Elseworlds Johnny Thunder. So, random. Robin Annual number 6 is written by the aforementioned Chuck Dixon, as usual. And Adventures of Superman Annual number 9. This features electric powered Superman, as I've said several times, and contains three unrelated shorter stories within it. Okay, that was Weird Western Tales. You can see here DC fandom lists them as follows, but it doesn't split them up via the thematic branding, which I've done. So hopefully that was helpful. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. As always, please like, comment, subscribe. As always, please follow me on Twitter at I am Thomas Judge, where I will post a daily review of whatever comics I've been reading. You can get an idea of what I'm up to on the channel. And as always, please support the channel by heading over to Amazon.com and checking out my prose novel about superheroes. It's a completely original piece of work. The first episode in it is called Arrivals, and the series as a whole is called No Gods or Kings. You can find an excerpt of that on my website, nogodsorkings.com. Until next time, everybody, stay classy.